Where are we starting to see the damage? We take a look at unemployment claims as a percentage of the employment base as it existed at the end of February. Pardon my printer noise here in the background, it's just shutting down. At the top left side of the screen, what you see are states that have had an extraordinarily high increase in the percentage of unemployed people in their workforce. At the bottom part of the screen, you see states that have experienced a smaller impact. But to be clear, there isn't a single state that has been able to avoid about 5% of its employment base suddenly losing their job in the period of just about a month to a month and a half. What we can expect from the commercial real estate market is that the states that are represented at the top left-hand side of the page are going to experience a deeper and longer contraction. And the opposite is true for the markets that are at the bottom part of the page. This is why we're focusing so much attention on the policy that's being taken by governors, county commissioners, and mayors around the country. They literally have a hand in the outcome of their underlying economy, more so than the identification of COVID cases, where we don't see a really high correlation. For example, Kentucky hasn't been very hardly hit by COVID cases relative to a market like New York, but look at the unemployment in the state of Kentucky over the past month or so. It's extraordinarily high. Looking state by state, we also don't see much correlation in terms of the size of the employment base and the number of people that have lost their job. On the left-hand side of the page, you see California and Texas, which represent the two largest employment bases by state in the country. On the right-hand side of the page, you have Vermont and Wyoming, the smallest. And what you see on both sides of the barbell is that a big state like California has had a more dramatic response in terms of lost jobs than Texas. On the other side of the page, Vermont has fared worse than Wyoming. What does this have? What can explain this performance? It has a lot to do with the shelter-in-place policy that local governments are putting into place. We've done a very quick analysis and just circled some of the states that are better off and worse off based on the rise in unemployment in their given state relative to the US average, which is about 11%. This is just another way of looking at the graph that I showed you on the previous page. But what happens when you lose your job? What's interesting to us is the idea that different states have different unemployment benefits, but every state has the same federal benefit that's provided from the CARES Act, an extra $600 per week. Some states have employees that when they lose their job and they collect their unemployment benefit, they're actually making more money than they would if they had kept their job in terms of the income that they get. This has to do with analysis that was conducted using the average income level in each state. And what you see is that the states on the left-hand side, which typically represent more affordable markets to operate and in which to live, the benefit can represent up to 30% extra money when you're on an unemployment benefit. On the right-hand side, some of the more expensive places to operate and live typically are experiencing a lower net amount of income to people that lose their jobs. What this means is that the underlying real estate markets may experience an even greater pinch, given that their unemployed people have not only a lower amount of money from having lost their jobs, but the cost of living in that environment is higher than it would be in some of the other states. Overall, the majority of states have a higher amount of money going to unemployed. And so it's been interesting to read articles recently about businesses that benefited from the PPP loan program and the CARES Act and tried to hire back their workers that they had furloughed. And some of the workers were mad because they were taking a pay cut by avoiding their unemployment benefit and going back to work. This is a really interesting phenomenon, and it's going to be important to watch going forward. You never want an employer to be competing with the government to try to woo people back to work. As the data comes out, another interesting phenomenon has been the changing expectations of the shape of the recovery. Many of us are familiar with the term V-curve as it's represented at the bottom of the page here, showing a snapback in the economy once we move past the worst of the pandemic. The number of people that are betting on a V-curve has fallen dramatically. RCLCO, a real estate advisory firm in Southern California, recently conducted a study of many of our clients, institutional investors in real estate, and what their expectations were for the shape of the recovery. Approximately 2/3 of survey respondents predicted not a V-curve recovery, not an L-curve recovery, or a swoosh, as it's being called in some corners, but a U-shaped recovery. In other words, it's a period of quieter economic contraction for the short term, followed by a snapback and then flat growth. How long the U curve will last is what's up for debate, and it's pretty evenly split between a longer period of time, maybe through the end of 2021, and a snapback maybe at the end of the summer. Depending on how states react in terms of the shelter-in-place orders, we're going to see some of these expectations shift going forward even more.